All right, so let's talk about Romanticism. This is the thing that happened after Neoclassicism. And what basically happened is that in England and then also in America and eventually everywhere, people started kind of getting tired of Neoclassicism. It was very formal, it was very good a lot of the times, but it tended to be kind of very dry. And so a lot of people looked at this and they said, well, you're not really doing what the classics would want you to do. And so they said, maybe that's what some of the Greeks would, but not the Romans. And that's why they came up with something that they called Romanticism, based on the word Romans. Okay. Um, Today, we think of something that is romantic, meaning something else altogether, but that comes from them. They invented all of that romantic means, love and all that sort of thing. That came out of them. So the years, I'm going to give the years here between 1800 and 1850, but realistically, it's still alive. It altered and changed a little bit. Today, we call a lot of this melodrama. It's still around. It's not considered quite as important, I suppose, today, but it is still very much around. Very, very popular plays are melodramatic and what we today would call melodrama, what back then they would call a romanticist play or a romantic play. So, like I said, it was a reaction to neoclassicism and is considered that they really want to focus on emotion over reason. They had the idea of using the plays to try to create emotion to make the audience care about what you're doing. Now, how do you do that? Well, one way is by making big, lavish spectacles, big stages, bright costumes, loud effects, grandiose acting to try to get the audience to care about what was going on. By the way, this wasn't only in theater. It was in theater, it was in literature, it was a lot in poetry, and it was also in music. And so if you've seen some of the music of this time period that really just tries to get your emotions involved in things, a lot of times they would get into lavish things. The best example I can use is Tchaikovsky, who did a piece called the 1812 Overture, where it goes da 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 boom, da 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 boom, and those booms are cannons. Okay, he lit cannons off as part of his orchestra, and that really got emotions involved. That's the kind of things they're trying to do with theater as well, trying to get emotions involved. Now, with theater, a lot of times the purpose, as I said, is to try to create an emotional reaction. So it's entertainment, but it's different than some of the other stuff. It's entertainment no longer just for the elites, for the people that understood why it was good, but now it's for the masses. Everyone's got emotions. And so you can get everyone involved in that, even if they're not educated enough to understand why it's supposed to be good. All of this had to do with this word. I kind of want to make sure that you understand this word very well, catharsis. So catharsis is an emotion. It basically means emotional cleansing. The idea is that people have hard lives, then they come to the theater all tense because of their hard lives. They sit down and they get involved in what's going on stage. And all of their lives kind of go away because they get wrapped up in this. And this story carries them through bad times, good times, and they're all get their hearts all wrapped up in this story, and then it's brought to a satisfying ending. Maybe a happy ending, maybe not, maybe a sad ending, but satisfying. And at the end, they feel like, ah, and all those negative emotions from their lives are cleared away. And that is catharsis. And that was what they really considered to be the purpose of theater, was to create catharsis, that emotional reaction. So the actors in this time period, they were men and women, and they were professionals. They were getting paid to do this. That's always the same now. That'll never change up until the modern day. The difference that happened in Romanticism is that often these people ended up becoming famous with great numbers of people. So this was more of the kind of celebrities that we see nowadays. It wasn't just celebrities with like the elites that knew how to appreciate them. Lots of people could appreciate these people. A lot of times they were also very, very good looking. And so This got them very, very popular. This is the beginning of what we now see today, where I always say that if you have an actor that decided to run for president or something like that, he'd probably win, because that whole get everyone to care about me sort of thing is a big deal in acting. That kind of starts here in Romanticism. So we're going to talk about two important writers, one from this time period and another one from the past that they really, really get a hold of him. And they really decided he was a great big deal. But first, let's talk about the one from this time period. And that guy's name is Johann Goethe. I know that looks like it should be pronounced Goethe. It's not. It's German and it's pronounced Goethe. And the play that he made that I want you to know about is called Faust. Now, if you remember from Theater Arts 1, we talked about a play called Dr. Faustus, which is about a guy that sells his soul to the devil in exchange for powers and stuff like this. Faust is in essence the same story, but Goethe makes a couple of very significant changes in it. Now, since some of you already are not familiar with that story because of Theater Arts 1 being a long time ago, or something that was interrupted because of COVID, I'm going to go ahead and give you a description of Faust, including some of the differences from Dr. Faustus. All right, now if you were around for Theater Arts 1, you might remember a play called Dr. Faustus by Chris Marlowe. And Faust has the same basic story where you have a guy whose name is Faust in this one that is going to end up making a deal with the devil. But there's a lot of very significant differences. The first difference is that we don't start with Faust. We in fact start with God. God is in heaven and doing whatever God does in heaven when along comes this guy, Mephistopheles. This is the devil, but in this play he's called Mephistopheles pretty much all the way through. And Mephistopheles makes a bet with God, basically, where he says, I think I can tempt anybody into doing evil things. And he said, well, I bet you can't tempt Faust, because Faust is a really good guy and he's very smart. And he said, well, what do you bet me? So he makes a bet with him that he can try to corrupt Faust and turn him to evil things. And God makes that bet. So apparently God has a pretty good opinion of what Faust is like. So then we see Faust. And Faust is actually pretty bored. He's a scholar, he's very smart, he knows a lot of different things, he's done all kinds of studying in lots of different subjects, and he's gotten bored. In fact, so bored that he's almost feeling like he's ready to kill himself, he's that bored. So he doesn't do that though, he goes off for a walk, he finds a little dog. He brings the little dog home and boop, 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 it changes into Mephistopheles. And Mephistopheles talks with him and says, hey, you're bored? I know how I can make you so you're not bored. I've got all kinds of wonderful entertainments using all of my powers, and I can use these to make you not bored. And all I ask in exchange is that afterwards I can bring you down to hell and you will be my slave for eternity. And Faust is really bored, and so he is actually tempted to do this, but actually he's saying, you know what though, I doubt it'll actually work. I kind of feel like I'm going to be bored anyway, even with your powers. So he makes this deal. This will only work if I'm not bored. So if at any point I say, I am satisfied with this, I love this moment, I wish this moment would last forever, at that point he can die and his soul can go to hell and be Mephistopheles' slave forever. Mephistopheles agrees to this because he thinks that's going to be pretty easy. It ends up not being so easy. They go off on a bunch of adventures. Among a couple different adventures, one of the first places they go is to see this witch. And the witch gives Faust a magical potion that changes him from an old man back down into a young man. That's important because now as a young man, he gets to feel kind of those stirrings of love and sex that younger men tend to have more than older men. And he sees this young woman named Gretchen. And he decides, ooh, I'm in love with her. And he decides he's going to seduce her. With Mephistopheles' help, he does that. He seduces her and he gets her pregnant. And she's actually in love with him, feels kind of bad for doing that, though, for getting pregnant, because she knows that's the wrong thing to do. The person that's really mad at him, though, is Valentine. Valentine is Gretchen's big brother. He's mad at him and decides that he is going to have a duel with him for the honor of his sister. So they fight each other. Actually, not much of a contest, though, because he has Mephistopheles on his side. He kills Valentine, and Valentine, with his dying breath, basically curses his sister for doing
for doing naughty things and getting pregnant outside of marriage, and he says like it's all her fault, and he curses her just as he's about to die. This makes her feel really, really terrible about this, and she basically leaves Faust, and Faust is trying to get her to come back, but it didn't work out so well. Mephistopheles says, well, let me take you to a little entertainment stuff, so that you go off, and there's another kind of adventure stuff that they do. Eventually, though, they do come back to Gretchen, and Gretchen is now in a dungeon. The reason she's in a dungeon is that she had her baby, and then in a fit of grief, she killed it. She had drowned it. And now she feels terrible. She's in a dungeon, and Faust and Mephistopheles show up to try to basically break her out of the dungeon. And she sees them, and at first she's glad to see him, but then she realizes he's trying to break her out. She's like, no, I am not going to break away. I've done a terrible thing. I'm going to pay for it. And that is right. I am not going to go with you and escape the rightful punishment of what I did. He doesn't know what to do about that, and so they end up running away, and then she is executed off stage. You don't see that happen. And Faust hears a voice saying, she is saved. And he's not sure exactly what that means, but in any case, that's the end of what is called part 1 of Faust. At this point, it's already a very, very long play. Part 2 starts with Faust asleep in a field, basically. Mephistopheles has cast some kind of a spell on him, so he'll forget entirely about Gretchen. And then they go off on adventures, and there's a lot of adventures. There's a lot of adventures, more than I'm going to actually tell you about. They run into an emperor, and the emperor has is having trouble with finances. He wants Faust to try and find gold, and then he summons up people from the dead. One of them he summons up is Helen of Troy, who's really beautiful. He ends up falling in love with her, marrying her, having children with her, and stuff like that, and then they die and stuff, and there's a lot. It goes on. It goes on and on and on for a long time. But eventually, Faust is using the power of Mephistopheles to do basically good things. He's stopping war, he's stopping poverty, he's helping people, and the devil is getting a little, he's doing like public works projects basically, and the devil is kind of getting a little irritated by this because this is taking a long time, and Faust is doing good with this power. And so the devil, in essence, tricks Faust into saying that he is satisfied. He is actually pretty satisfied. He's done some great things and he feels good about it, but the devil basically tricks him into saying the words, and so he says the words that he's satisfied. He suddenly is going to die, and Mephistopheles is going to drag him down to hell. At that point, a bunch of angels show up, and the angels basically said, nope, 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 that doesn't work, you can't do it that way. He is coming to heaven. And they bring him to heaven because they say a good soul that is never satisfied with doing enough good in the world belongs in heaven. And we also find out that God has been listening to Gretchen, who is in heaven, and has been basically pleading for Faust to be able to be forgiven. So, at the end, despite the fact that Faust made a deal with the devil and has been using devilish powers for the whole play, he goes to heaven, leaving Mephistopheles saying, it's not fair, I should have won. And that's basically the end of the play.
So that is Goethe's Faust. It's a really great play, but probably not a play you're likely to see, at least not any way in a live performance kind of thing, because, well, from today's point of view, it's almost unstageable. For one reason, because it is just way too long. It's just a very long, humongous play. For reference, okay, here's a copy of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Notice the length of the size of that. This is Goethe's Faust. Notice how much bigger that is, okay? It's just a lot bigger. It's probably a good, and this is a bigger book too. It's probably a good, 3 times the size of it. And Macbeth's not a short play. This play is huge. It would probably take a good 5 or 6 hours to fully do the entire play. The most I've ever seen anybody doing is Act 1. They'll do Act 1 and consider that to be one play. It's almost unstageable because it's that long. It probably was staged during Goethe's lifetime because Goethe was very, very influential. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if when he was alive, he was able to get it staged. It was certainly given a lot of attention as being a great piece of art, even if it wasn't a piece of theater that you could do very well. In any case, though, that's Faust. Now, the other writer that I want you to know about during this time period, that became big, I should say, during this time period, um, was a guy that wasn't born during this time period, but he became a really big star with the Romantics. And that guy's name was William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was a big deal when he was alive, but only among a small amount of people. And if you remember from Theater Arts 1, um, he was not like even considered to be the greatest of all time at that point. There were other people that were also considered to be really, really good. The Restoration kind of forgot about him. Neoclassics, they recognized his skill, but they kind of felt like, yes, but he's doing it wrong because he didn't follow any of the unities and stuff like this. The Romantics, though, they discovered Shakespeare and they started reading through his plays, and he was exactly the kind of plays that they wanted. His plays are very emotional and very lavish. More than that, they make the point a lot of times that emotions matter. Love matters. Love ought to prevail. Your heart should lead you in front of where your mind does. And Shakespeare makes that point again and again, valuing emotion. Um, so the Romantics made Shakespeare a great big star, and he was the most popular playwright of all time during the Romantic periods. And you know what happened is that even after Romanticism started to kind of go away a little bit and lead into realism, which we're going to talk about next time, Shakespeare stayed popular. Shakespeare is still today the most popular playwright of all time. And after the Romantics, he's never again not the most popular playwright of all time. And so, if you've ever enjoyed reading Shakespeare or being in Shakespeare, you can thank the Romantics, because if it wasn't for them, you'd probably be reading Ben Jonson or something like that. All right, so I'm going to stop right there, but I am going to introduce the discussion question down below. Since Romanticism had so much to do with emotion, I want you to see how emotion is portrayed on television and movies and stuff today. I want you to think in your head of something that you saw recently, either on TV or in a movie or even in a commercial, some piece of drama, though, in which people were trying to make you feel a certain emotion. Now, I'm gonna say that I don't want it to be something that is trying to make you laugh, only because, well, very quickly, the purpose of making somebody laugh. You need to make sure the audience doesn't care all that much. If you cared about Tom and Jerry, you wouldn't laugh when they get hurt and stuff like that. So funny tends to mean that you don't get invested in the characters. So not funny, but any other emotion. And tell me the thing you watched, and then what emotion is it trying to get you to do? Is it trying to make you feel love or pity or fear, or what emotion is it trying to get to do? And then I want you to look at what the actors are doing. What specific things do the actors do to try to make you feel that emotion? Try to notice that. Watch and see what emotion they're going for and how they try to create that in you. So when you have something, put it in the discussion down below, and that's it. Have a great day.